Hello, welcome back to Building Resilience in a Changing World. This is Unit 3. So if you're here for some reason you go Unit 3, go over to the channel page and begin with Unit 1. This is Unit 3, which is going to focus on the third treasure of the Daoism here, the three wisdom treasures, humility. And it's also going to focus on the four forms of rest. That's how you've defined it in Language of the Soul, Path of Simplicity, your book, Martin. Before we begin, remember there are resources that you can access, more good stuff in the description below the video here. So take a look if you want to, and we'll dive in. So humility is something, again, like simplicity, that, well, it's a sticky situation in terms of our modern language, in terms of how we often define it. And I really loved how you defined it when we were looking into the root of this and how it's viewed.
Right, right. And so the definitions we see out there in the world are in large measure centered around a modest or low view of one's own importance,
Hmm.
humbleness. And the other one being that was predominant in as I looked at different definitions was the quality of being modest or respectful in one's self-assessment or behavior. And I feel like that gets a little closer to what we're seeking to articulate when we use the word humility as it pertains to the notion of resilience, but also the notion of an inner practice. What does
Mm.
an inner practice as it pertains to humility really, what does the practice of humility really look like? Okay. And the definition that I practice within my life is a letting go of the ego's need to define an experience within a framework that is by nature limiting. What do I mean by that?
Hmm.
Well, if we go back to the first unit on compassion, we touched upon the notion of living in big stories within ourselves,
Right.
living in a big, big story about who we are. What we mean, though, when we talk about living in a big story, is this is a story where we've gone down into our wisdom. We've allowed our wisdom to express our deepest truths. It's allowed us to explore our values, our what we truly hold as the virtues of our being, what truly matters to us, and then allow that to express itself as the big story. Humility is, in essence, getting the ego out of the center of the conversation as the only voice in the conversation. My
Mm.
wants, my desires, my needs are all that matter. Now, I'm not saying don't consider one's needs. I think our needs matter a great deal. But at what cost? To ourselves and to others. What really matters to us? And do we want to exist within a framework that is by nature limiting? Or do we want to live in a bigger story that isn't about allowing that limiting framework, those ways in which some people in the world have in essence said, well, you know, an example might be the only thing that matters in the world is our financial well-being. All that matters is money. That is in by nature a limiting framework. right?
Mm,
Because it's in
mhm,
essence saying it's the only thing that matters. And while some people might say, well, if I take care of my finances and I make that my centerpiece, then I'm taking care of my family. Maybe. Depends upon what our family needs at any given moment. If the only thing that matters is what's in our bank account and what material goods we can give our family, that's a very limiting way of defining what our lives are about. I'm not saying don't have a strong sense of like um, caring for our material needs. I'm saying if that's the only consideration or the one that overrides everything else, then that is by nature a limiting framework. And we need to look at that. And one of the beautiful things that came out of the tragic nature of the pandemic is a lot of people reassessed what that meant and are still reassessing that in
indeed.
terms of the quality of their lives. And one of the beautiful things that I love seeing during that time was in the middle of the day, families out taking walks. It was extraordinary. And I still see it to some degree. And it was something that changed in the world, a beautiful thing, because people said, well, it was dictated by a worldwide pandemic, but it was still a gift, right? And a gift that people, what they did with it is what mattered. Because it could have just as easily, mom and dad could have just been focused on the computer screen and on their work. And instead they said, let's take this time and be together as a family. Let's do things together, right? That's a way of stepping out of a limiting framework, okay? Uh, when I think of letting go of the ego's need to define an experience, for me personally, what's allowed me to stay in a conversation of inquiry and healing and growing around this is my practice in soul journaling and meditation. It's allowed me to keep inquiring more and more deeply into what really matters and giving myself the ability, as I like to say, to allow the ego to let go into the warm embrace of the soul, to allow the to allow our my to allow myself
Mhm.
the ability to, in essence, question things that I just unconsciously held as true. This is at the very core of what it means to be humble, because we're being humble with ourselves, with our belief systems,
Yeah.
right?
There's this sense when we are humble through our practice, right? Soul journaling, stillness practice, meditation, a sense of slowing down. We've talked about the pause, we've talked about discernment, we've talked about the microcosmic orbit of the breath. And there's a slowing down into presence, into the present moment. There's a grounding and an integration into the present moment that we haven't touched upon yet that really speaks to the playfulness and the alive quality that you noted in terms of taking walks, right? We're not thinking about rest and we're not thinking about walks often in the same place. But this is where I'd like to take the workshop right now. There's a willingness in all of us in practicing humility. It's foundational to living a restful life.
Mm-hmm.
as described through the four forms of rest in Language of the Soul, A Path of Simplicity. And this was something that was already really firmly in place when we were putting the book together. That wasn't something that changed so much. So much changed in the writing, but these four forms of rest offered such compassion, such simplicity, such humbleness, such humility, and just choosing to recognize how we can rest
Mm-hmm.
in the world. And this is what we like to break down now, these four forms. The first step in creating healing and growth, as we've talked about in one's life, is, well, embodying humility so that one may be at ease and know when to rest, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a lifelong practice. Everything that we've talked about, we can emphasize this is a lifelong practice. It's often one of the most difficult challenges for us as modern humans in our hyperactive world where capitalism drives all these forces, where money can be seen as the thing rather than a tool. Most of us have no idea how fatigued physically and emotionally and spiritually we become through the patterns and habits and worries and frustrations.
Mm-hmm.
And so the simple framework here, very clear framework of the four forms, offers us opportunities to rest and regenerate. So obviously the first form, when we think of rest, we think of sleep, right? Sleep till rested, number one. Initially, you will want to set aside a minimum of 9 hours for sleeping. That may sound like a lot, but really just consider the nature of sleep. You may wake up mid cycle or before you intended to awaken. Well, continue to rest even if you're not sleeping. If it's challenging to get to sleep, which it can be for me, focus on your pre sleep practices. Extend the time you allocate for settling down to sleep. You could consider a shower, yoga, stretching, meditation, journaling, recorded sounds that are gentle, that are soothing, reading. I love reading before bed because it any energy, any creative energy or even egoic driven energy that I have goes into that reading, that fantasy space. I'm satisfied, I'm nourished by that, and that magic of reading then kind of washes over me.
Mm.
You can listen to a podcast, even, not overly stimulating stuff, but something that can speak to, you know, your heart's desires, your need to settle down.
Yeah.
It's okay to rest. This is something that we feel in the depths of our souls. This is a universal thing that everybody feels like we can't accept that. It's okay to rest. It's needed to heal and grow. It's not time wasted. It's time that's invested in coming to life more fully. Everything that we've talked about.
And that's why the linkage between humility or humbleness and the need to rest is so intrinsically linked. Just what you just shared, right?
Yeah.
It's our egos identify so actively with our doings. And it's really challenging to let go of that notion and let go into the very real necessity that if I'm well rested, there's so much more of me available to share with the world. And to that end, I want to step into the second form, which is to practice not doing each day. So, what does that mean? Once, twice, well, as often as is needed and your schedule will allow, right? And this is different in essence than taking breaks.
Mm-hmm.
This is some significant period or periods each day where for an hour, a 2 or 2 hours, or it might be 45 minutes, you do nothing, right? It might be you might sit down and read a book or watch a TV show. It might be a gentle walk. It might be sitting on the porch or on the bench outside your office. Heck, if needed in a very busy environment, it might necessarily, and this fits into the breaks as well, but it may very well be that just walking into the bathroom, closing the stall door, and just breathing 15, 20 minutes in there. Doesn't let go of the idea of what that looks like, what anyone, who cares? If you need that time, take it. And if that's the only place it can happen, then do it, right? Um, that not doing space, it 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 begins to untether the ego's hold on what matters. And it allows a different kind of driving force, one that's less about ambition and more about calling to begin to arise within your life. All right. The third form, take many short breaks each day. I strongly suggest every hour. Take 5 to 10 minutes, do whatever's necessary. What I encourage you not to do is remain in your workspace, whatever your workspace is. And if it's in front of a computer, don't take a break and then go start scrolling over to, some entertainment on the computer. Step away from the space. Go to the break room, go to the bathroom, walk outside, uh, walk up and down the stairs, do a loop around the building, right? Do whatever it takes. Do some stretching, do some breathing. These little mini breaks of 5 or less minutes, they matter. And when it comes to the lunch break, don't cut it short and don't have your lunch break at your workstation. Have someplace else to go to eat your food.
Even your
Unplug,
car.
even to your car, right? Yeah. So give yourself permission to do this. And what you'll find is these regular breaks over the space of an entire workday, you'll find that you're more rested, and even of equal importance, there's more joy and ease in the activities because you're giving yourself these breaks throughout the day.
The fourth form really comes full circle to what is at the core of the workshop for you all. Resting the mind as a multi-daily practice means stepping into that Daoyin meditation. So Martin's already offered you the practice of doing 5 or 10 minutes to begin, and then finding another time in the day, choosing another time in the day to do it again. Don't concern yourself with being good at this. I think this is something that's important when we talk about it from the framework of resting the mind throughout the day. This does take practice. And let this be okay. What matters is making it a practice initially every morning and then finding those times throughout the day when you go, it's time. It's that whisper that comes up. You
Mhm.
can set an alarm on your phone to say, all right, time to take a break or whatever. Yeah, do what feels right to you. But in this sense, what's going to feel right is going to come up through that well of wisdom. And it's not the mind saying, okay, time to do it. It's letting the mind rest. Letting the mind rest through the stillness practice is extraordinary because after a time, and this is talked about in the podcast and in the book, in your course, the year-long course, you're cultivating an inner observer, right? A part of yourself that is present and yet has a real sense to the big story that breathes in and out in this way that you can look at yourself in the world without the ego, without the mind taking control. It's a revelatory thing when the observer serves to guide your actions and presence. And this shifts the relationship with the unnecessary suffering that we've noted in the prior units. Resting your mind each day as a multi daily practice really truly does change one's perception of themselves and of the world. And it's happening in real time because we're making the choice to step into these things. We learn to catch ourselves before we react and fall into unnecessary suffering because we've chosen to rest the mind. And over time, that observer becomes more potent and potent and potent. So, right now, in laying out all four forms of rest, it's now once again time to enter into a Daoyin meditation practice. So, go ahead and take 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then come on back for the final part of the workshop.
Welcome back from your meditation, and we're going to now step into the journaling portion of our work. And the prompt for today is, which form of rest is your big edge? What does your wisdom offer you in humbly letting go into that practice?
Hmm.
Let me repeat that. What form of rest is your big edge? What does your wisdom offer you in humbly letting go into the practice? So take 15, 20 minutes and write. Allow the soul to write, to whisper into your ear. Give your wisdom a voice. And we'll see you in about 15 to 20 minutes.
Welcome back from the journaling. So, I mean, it's amazing to be at this point with you, Martin, and everyone watching and listening. We are coming to a close on this workshop for building resilience. I want to thank you, Martin, for taking the time with me to include me in this new way as a co-facilitator and bringing this to what we hope is a whole new audience of people. So thank you all for staying through with all these offerings and the core practice as well as all the other little practices that come and reside in that warm embrace of the soul.
Mhm. Yeah, and to recognize that all of us, all of us have the strength and empowerment already within us to adapt and strengthen our ability to be in this very challenging challenging changes that we're seeing in the world, to give ourselves permission to be okay with where we are
Hmm.
and the sense of possibility that we can do better in this changing world, whatever doing better means for us, and that we can truly be resilient as a practice in the world.
And let that wash over you. That's something that's really key here. The ease at which we keep returning to in our offerings. Let that not feel like it's another edge. It may be, and that's okay. But in time with practice, with creativity, and with playfulness, all of this allows you to experience the resilience that you're seeking.
Mhm.
So we have all of the resources that we've noted along the way, including Language of the Soul year-long course. You can check that out over on your website, right, Martin? martinperkins.com.
Mhm.
And there's also the paperback and audio book for Language of the Soul, Path of Simplicity. There's the blog, which has all sorts of different little good pieces, a lot of things that we touched upon today, and so many other things to explore.
Mhm.
And there's our podcast that we've been having a blast doing, Language of the Soul, conversations on healing and growth. And of course, since you're here, and we want to extend that gratitude for you staying through a workshop, it speaks to the resiliency that you already have by coming and participating in this self-learning space, right? That's extraordinary into itself. And I really want to take a moment to just acknowledge that, whomever you are, wherever you are. And please, if you feel that this has offered you something nourishing, empowering in your path to building resilience, share it with one person. Again, that kind of word of mouth is extraordinary. And the way that the web of resilience, not the barrier, but the web of resilience is grown from within us and shared with others. I'm Ben Umstead.
And I'm Martin Perkins, and I have an added bonus to those people who have participated and brought themselves to this point in um, in participating in all 3 units. Send me an email, and I'll send you a free audio book copy of my book, Language of the Soul: A Pathway of Simplicity. I saved it to the end because, frankly, I want this offering to be shared with people who have actually invested in themselves
Mhm.
by taking the workshop. So thank you, and hopefully I'll hear from you via email and I'll be able to send you a free copy of the audiobook. Take care.
Take care.